Yeah, what up, folks? So I wanted to show you some updates because some cool stuff is here. You're only going to have my Unity window because I'm using the Windows recorder thing there, but a couple things that I wanted to show, and I've got a list. First, the prefab of the two weapons. So originally what I was working on was getting this hand-to-hand working, and I was having troubles with the animations. The things that I had to do in here, I had to learn like how to set this up. What was really important was that I had an any state that would go to punch, because that's like punch going to itself, and I had to set the transition to can transition to self. I'll explain a little bit why, but effectively what I was doing was getting the audio onto the actual, let's take this out of debug. I had to get the audio onto the animation itself, and that was because if you can imagine like a trigger, for example, every time that I would click, because the frames are moving so fast, one click could kind of fall onto 2 frames. So what would end up happening was that it would trigger twice, the sound would play twice, and when I would push and hold, it would trigger like 100 of them in a second. So the sound playing through code would just kind of go like, you know, it was pretty crazy. I stopped using triggers for that reason, and I can't show the code because it doesn't, like, you won't see the fact that I just clicked over, but you have to use bools, and you had to turn it on going into the punch, but then you also had to turn it off to go back to idle. So I have an is attacking here that's places false. Now I ended up getting all of this working, so I have 2 weapons. So let's just go ahead and play for a second. So what you'll end up noticing is that I've got a weapons inventory, and in that I've got a hand-to-hand and I've got a sword. So I'm going to turn the sword off, and you're going to see, shit, that's super loud. I don't know if that's as loud for you as it is for me, but I got to turn that down. Alright, so depending on how loud that is, adjust your speakers now. Alright, so this is the hand-to-hand, and you go out, you can punch the mob, and he will die because there's collision and whatnot there in code, and it's on the hand-to-hand. So this punching script has it, and it delivers to the method that's on the mob for take damage, and it just says, you know, the variable is going to be 1 in this case, and so I can kill the mob, and then he dies. Let's go ahead and just spawn another enemy. That's not going to work. Oops. So that's the hand-to-hand, and now the rotation for the player, the player controller is responsible for what is currently being listed as the gun arm, and that's on hand-to-hand, but I'm supposed to have that on the weapon inventory. So you can see here that on the weapon inventory, it follows the mouse. So the rotation of that weapon inventory, which is just an empty game object, is following. And because the hand-to-hand underneath of it and the sprites for right and left hand are attached, they just follow, obviously. And then what was I going to say here? Yeah, so that's pretty much it there, I think. So for the hand-to-hand, there's a punching script. Now, what I ended up doing was I duplicated this, so the punching script is on the sword. So let's just switch over the sword. So we're going to turn the sword on, and we're going to turn the hand-to-hand off. And I changed, so take a look at this guy here, I guess. I changed the sword so that it was facing away, and when the animation goes, it swipes in front. But it is going to swipe towards the mouse, because it's always to the right of whatever, what is it, that X value is, right? I think that's what it is. X is this way, Y is that way, so the Y plane plus, I guess. Anyways, I might have that wrong, but so it's always to the positive, to the right hand side. So if the mouse is over here, it's going to swipe in that direction. If the mouse is here, it's going to swipe up. Same thing as the punch, nothing changes, right? And the sword, the animation itself is on the sword weapon. And so in the animation, we have all this stuff here, right? And it's the same thing for the hand-to-hand. So if I go to the hand-to-hand, this is the punch action, right? Which is the same thing as the swing action for the most part. In this instance, I had to add a sprite with a collider to be the sword. And that means that when I added the property for the collider that is on that sprite, I chose that sprite. Like, I have to rename this to, you know, like sword, or, you know, image or body or whatever I want to call it. And the collider turns on the first frame and then stays on until it turns off. So if we watch the collider here, you can see the collider goes on as the sword swings. So if we take a look at the collider, which is just a circle right now, so just don't worry about it. It's hard to see, but it turns a bright green because it turns on, and the collider is moving with the sword. So the idea here is that I'm going to take the collider and I'm going to put the collider, you know, let's say like this, and that way when I'm attacking through the animation, so I guess you can kind of see some of the frames of the animation. Well, I can push and hold. So if you're looking at the character on the left hand side there, you can see the sword goes through that swipe. And so if the collider is attached and it's the same shape as the sword, then it's going to be pretty damn accurate. And the reason I chose to do that was because normally when they code, and all the tutorials that I've seen online, they have a hitbox in front of the character that in the code just appears for a second, and it just records any objects that are inside of it. And if it is an enemy, then it applies damage and so on and so forth. And so the hitbox is right here, and then so they attack, and it goes kind of like click on, click off, click on, click off. And so it's just for that moment that you click that it records all the objects. And what I wanted was I wanted the sword to more clearly represent the space that it's actually attacking. But I didn't want the sword to hurt an enemy. Let's go grab our enemy again here and just reset its transformation. Hey, oh, I don't have any enemies. I didn't have them in the damn thing. That was silly. Okay. Is it attacking right now? No, it's not. Okay, so I had this issue earlier because I ended up changing something or whatever the case, so I just gotta figure this out real quick again. So on the sprite, the collider, that's right, on the left hand. Oh, that's right, it's because it didn't have the punching script, that's right. So I'm gonna add the punching script. And so, exactly, as you can see, the collider turns on and off. So let's just bring our enemy back again. And then so it's hitting. What I didn't want, and if you remember the collider on the sword, right? So the collider is, okay, let's go like this. The collider is touching the enemy right now, technically, but it's not on, which is why it's not hurting them. But if I swipe, it hurts them. And it does some damage from the back because the sword is there, right? So I guess I can fix that up in the animations and, you know, like change where the sword is or whatever the case, but maybe that would be one reason. I just encountered this now, so this is new to me now, actually. Maybe that's one reason why they would have like a hitbox here, so that when you would attack, it would only be in a hitbox, because that's where your intended attack is meant to go. But anyways, nonetheless, I wanted the accuracy. I've spent a lot of time coding this. I kind of like it. Yeah, so it turns on and off. Okay, so what was the next thing? Player animation belongs to the player. So the animator. Now it's saying none, but my guy is breathing, so I'm a little confused. Okay, well, I guess I didn't set the animator. Oh, because I didn't have to turn anything. Oops, because I didn't have to turn anything on or off or whatever the case. Because I didn't have the moving animation done yet. I only have the idle animation. That's why. Yeah, because the walking animation is not done. Okay, so that makes sense. So the idle animation on the player is on the player. It's on that script there. And for the weapons, it's on the weapons themselves, which are inside the inventory. So the idea is that I'm going to have a mouse wheel, and the mouse wheel is going to turn these on and off. But I'm going to have multiple weapons in here. So I'm going to have, let's say, I don't know, 5, 6 weapons, you know, including some magic spells, right? And the little particles that you saw in the enemy, so let's, this, which, right there, you can see that. Oh, I suppose I could loop it. So these effects, what I ended up learning was that you can have collisions. And on the script, you can put into the on collision enter kind of thing. You can have it so that these actually do something, like do damage, give damage, for example. Now I know that this is a bit of a mess, but let's say that this was a stationary trap and it was a magic spell, and I've got my mouse here, so I click and then it puts that on the ground, boop, and it instantiates one of those. All of these little particles, when they would touch an enemy, would do damage to it. But if I was to like spread this out so that there were like 5 or 6 of them, and they're going over, let's say, like a 3x3 block kind of like section, right? These 9 little squares here, and it's going like boop, 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 like this. I could call that, let's say, like poison gas or something, for example. And it wouldn't be like a hitbox area of 3x3 doing damage if the mob walks in. It would be like, literally, if the thing happens to spawn here and the enemy's there, then it would do damage on spawning. So I could turn this into, let's say, like a fountain, for example, and have that fountain attached to an instantiated object that has like a transform, moving it to the right all the time. So I click, it comes out like a bullet. It's invisible, but the fountain isn't, and it's like spraying little bubbles or whatever, And the bubbles are what would, I just think it's awesome that you can have such accuracy on a 2D game, using like effects and the sword and stuff to have such accurate collisions. Because every game that I've ever played, it's always about hitboxes, right? And it's like, oh, there's a box in front of you, so it's like you can move like in and out to get in or out of the hitbox area to do your attacks. But it's like, what if your sword, you click it and it kind of like, it throws it in an arc, So would I have to put a giant box, and it's like if it's anywhere inside that arc, that animation, or maybe I'd have to like turn on and off one of those like coded circle triggers or whatever, like try to do like every frame or something, just like click 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 click, and it's like recording all the enemies that are. It just seems kind of crazy that I can just put a collider on the actual object itself, throw the object in an animation, and if it collides, it does what I want it to do. So I just think it's nuts, and then that's kind of what I want to build this whole like little game thing on. So let's just stop this for a second. So the sword, the collisions, all that stuff. I'm just looking at my list here. Turn weapons on and off. Weapon collision during the animation. That's right, we got that. Code for the weapons is reused right now, so you already know that because in this I'm using the punching attack right now on the sword. So I just want to show again, now that we've seen the sword flail around a little bit, hand to hand, same thing. The collider for the hand to hand on the left hand in this case is literally just the hand. So like, and it turns on for a fraction of a second, and it's only going to do damage in that little path that it travels, and only if it collides. So anyways, I just think that's freaking awesome. Did I explain why triggers don't work? Triggers during the animation, they kind of make like a weird sound, because in one click, especially if you're triggering, like, you can't see my code right now, but it's like if mouse button down and if like get mouse button, and both of those instances end up being true. And even if you put like a shot counter in there, it doesn't seem to function or do anything, because the animation itself is going to play in full, because I've chose for there to be exit time for the punch. Like the punch has to complete one full animation like this, right? And so every time that I punch, it was like doing weird things. It was like doubling up. It would click, it would catch 2 frames or 3 frames. If I was to push and hold like this, then it would end up going like brrr, and just like doing 1,000 sounds, and it was obnoxious. So it's literally taking me 2 days to figure out this, and then to like read up and try to educate myself a little bit and find out that you can put scripts on freaking on well, states, I guess is what you would call it, like on these animations, right? And then, oh yeah, the other thing that was kind of tricky was that I had to have the false boolean. I'm not going to say that I've got this all set up properly or that the code looks beautiful, but the thing is you know, it's working. It's working, but it's taking me a long time to go through all the options. You wouldn't imagine how freaking difficult it was, but so yeah, so there you go. So turn off the weapons. I have no hands. That's something that I could resolve. Turn on this one. Turn on that one. I've got my hands and my weapon. Sounds are working. The enemies are working. There's no sound on this swing, this sword swing. But so I've got magic coming. Oh, and the other cool thing that I had was the hand right now does shadows. So it deflects light. And did I put the shadow thing on the sword? No, I didn't. But it's on the left hand, because for the hand it was on the left hand. And I thought it would be cool. Let's go ahead and turn this on. I know you can already see it, but it just, for me, it makes me feel better. I thought it would just be cool feedback, you know, visual, that the fist actually makes a shadow if you're punching near the light, right? And I still got my dodge and stuff. The player's emitting a small amount of light. I put 4 lights to try to keep this place dark a little bit, and the monster was emitting a green shaded light. So let's go ahead and just add another one of those dudes in here. Bum, 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 bum. So he was emitting a green light as a result of green. And let's finish him off with the sword, and then that'll be the end of the video. Come here, you little fucker. I gotta change my hitbox, but there we go. And that is it. That's what I want to show you guys. Say bye to dude. Bye, dude.